Let's talk about warranties and representations. Under a typical contract, the songwriter is saying, "This is my track, nobody else." Does it happen that some bandmate comes along after a song begins to be popular and say, "Hey, wait a minute, I'm a co-writer on that song," and how do you protect your writer against that? And how do you advise them on those kinds of things?
It does happen. I mean, there are cases where people have asserted rights after the fact. The case involving a rock band called Better Than Ezra. Have you ever heard of Better Than Ezra? They were like a 90s
See heads nodding all around
sort
the room,
of college rock kind of band from Louisiana, and the courts in Louisiana are just a world unto themselves. So.
Yes.
So the litigation happened in Louisiana, but the drummer in the band Better Than Ezra claimed to be a co-writer of the songs that were on the group's records because he played drums on them. He said, the drum part is part of the song, and I played on it, and I'm a co-writer. And court ultimately concluded that he wasn't a co-writer, but certainly that kind of claim happens, with some frequency. The great case involving Whiter Shade of Pale by Procol Harum, and the organist, Matthew Fisher, who played the organ intro to Whiter Shade of Pale, which we can all hear in our heads as I'm saying this.
We know it well.
There have been over 700 cover versions of that song, and they all include that organ intro. I mean, it's part of the song. It's not
And
just...
he didn't get paid.
And he never got paid a dime for that.
Ooh,
and
that
he,
hurts,
and
doesn't
he
it?
sued in the UK in 2004. The record came out in 67. He sued in 2004, and he was allowed to go forward, and he is now a co-writer on that song.
Wow.
Where was he for 40 years?
He was
Yeah.
Under some sort of drug
Yeah.
induced coma?
Exactly, and that was the question. Why did he wait around so long? And the court ultimately in the UK was not concerned about that because they said Gary Brooker, who is credited as the writer of that song, has been collecting royalties, without accounting to anybody for 40 years. He's benefited from that, so he can't really complain that the guy's coming out of the woodwork too late.
Yeah.
But those
Wow.
those kinds of disputes do come up, and that certainly is a possibility as you have these different sort of fractionated rights going on, that people are going to say, here's another revenue stream.
So when somebody comes to you who's a single individual member of a band of 3 guys and they are constantly performing and creating together, do you take it upon yourself to say, have you guys talked about this? I mean, shouldn't in that situation, shouldn't the writer have some sort of a written agreement with his bandmates to lay it out the way it should be? Maybe the split letter that
We
Andy,
do a
that you-
very simple split letter, which is after a song is written, that the writers put down 10% for me, 25% for you, 50%. Because under the copyright statute, unless you have something in writing, the law presumes everything is divided equally. So let's assume you have someone who writes the music and 2 people who write the lyrics. Unless you have a split letter that shows 50, 25, 25, everyone will get a third unless you have that writing. It doesn't have to be complicated, it just has to be in writing. It can be more complicated than that because you can have approval rights as to licensing and things like that, but to protect yourself before people leave the studio, do that because people's memories change, they think they're more important later on. You have situations like you just, because remind me, I did have a case where someone was the drummer and we had to negotiate it because they were the bigger writer wasn't giving up money, and they actually went back and listened to the piano demo to see what the song originally sounded like, to see whether or not the additions were justified a piece of the copyright.
Wow.
So do it prophylactically. It is so much better than to try and do it after the fact.
And we have a sample split letter for those of you who are online and want to look at the, there's a sample split letter among our documents. Again, on the Learn More tab, if you scroll down, you'll see it. So thank you, Andy, for giving us that. I'm going to
And just another,
Sure.
on the subject of warranties, in addition to ownership and originality, often a publisher will want a warranty that there are no encumbrances on the song, no other advances that have to be paid back, that sort of thing. So that if the writer has had any other agreements pertaining to that song, that's something that the publisher is going to need to know about. And generally will want a warranty that there aren't any such agreements.
And be careful that your co-writer is not bringing any sort of infringing material, because if there is a lot, then they hold up your income stream as well. They don't care that you didn't, nothing that you contributed was infringing. Publishers, again, to the extent they have the power, will hold up any royalties payable to you. So they have all these clubs that they can sort of beat you down with, and that's the warranties and reps cover that issue.
Yeah. Let's talk about venue for a second. Obviously, if you want your songwriter not to have to travel across the country to file some sort of a legal action if it was required. Can you get venue changed in a publishing agreement very easily?
Not very easily.
Okay.
I mean,
Can you
it's a-
get it changed?
It's a bargaining chip,
Uh-huh.
and if you want to give up something else for it, maybe you'll get it changed. But it's another one of those just sort of leverage points that the publisher usually has more leverage than the writer in an agreement like this, and can usually dictate where they want the lawsuit to be if there is one.
They particularly love New York because New York is a much more pro-business state. Again, California, and the other thing that they want, and to some extent you want a state that has a body of law that understands songwriting and copyright. I mean, Idaho is probably not the best place to bring a lawsuit on these issues because they're scratching their head saying, I have not a clue what the publisher share is versus the writer share.
Or Louisiana.
Yeah, or Louisiana, which is, yes, I've got a client there. It's so confusing. So there is an advantage to having a state that understands the issues. If you can direct it to a state that's more pro-artist, you're better off. But the other reason they do it, and it is a leverage point, is they want you to have to travel. They want you to have to,
Sure.
and the big companies have the money
Sure.
that they can, hire the big gun lawyers and force you to spend a lot of money. And so you look and go, it's too expensive for me to do this, and you give up and walk away.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right, and often a copyright infringement lawsuit or a breach of contract lawsuit for a working songwriter is not going to be a seven-figure payday, and it's not going to be worth spending half of that to go litigate in some distant city.
Don't you do things on a contingency basis?
I know.